Shalom Aleichem and welcome back, Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Brodt. We've already done 2 episodes on Rav Chaim Kanievski's Seforim. Baruch Hashem, the feedback's been tremendous, and that's why we're doing some more. I'm not here to waste people's times. Today, we would like to focus on the sefer Nachal Eisan, which was written about the Sugya of Egla Arufa. So before we begin, as certain people have the minhag is to read emails. So one email that we got is from somebody in Eretz Yisrael who writes the following: just finished your second video on the Seforim of Rav Chaim. Amazing. You are fun to watch and listen to. Anyone ever say you're fun, Rabbi Eliezer? Thank you. He mentions that he also says, keep up the great work. And he says, if your wife ever wonders what you do all day, just send her to me. So, okay, if your wife ever wonders, we have someone who to send her to make sure that you're behaving. Okay, so Rabbi Eliezer, how are you today? What do you want to start off with?
Baruch Hashem. Well, so Hashem, let's start off right now with the Nachal Eisan of Rav Chaim Kanievski. So as everyone by now it comes up, and most conversations are about Rav Chaim Kanievski. He wrote a sefer at some point about Egla Arufa, and some people are ma'irich about it for a minute, others a little more. And bottom line is that they do say that it's an incredible sefer, and there's no question that it is one incredible sefer. Okay, now today would like to speak a little bit about this sefer, some points about it. One could technically speak about the sefer forever, as we'll see, because Rabbi Chaim Kanievski just goes on and on and on about Egla Arufa like nobody's business. Now, but first, before anything, there's earlier this year a volume which I hope to discuss a little bit more later on, between a series of correspondences that went over many years between Rav Dov Landau of Bnei Brak and Rav Chaim Kanievski. They were very close. They also had letters in learning, and they were printed. And one of the letters, after the Nachal Eisan comes out, Rav Dov Landau, one of the great Gedolim alive today, writes to him, your sefer is a sefer on Nifla, Pliei Pliois, Hirchav Rubai Tairasai, Marchiv in Yanim, Marchivi Levavois is Levavi La'ayim Behem. Bekitzer, he goes, I learned a lot of it, and I have some ha'aris, and he goes on, and now Rav Dov Landau also writes in general very bekitzer, similar to Rav Chaim Kanievski legendary writing bekitzer, but in these letters, it's a 33-page letter with ha'aris and ha'aris and ha'aris. He says, these are only some of the ha'aris I have on the sefer, and then Rav Chaim Kanievski answers him at least some of the ha'aris, and they're printed also over here. So we have already at the time in the 1970s when the sefer actually comes out, a friend of his writing that it's an incredible sefer. Now the sefer has been printed in a bunch of editions, which usually means that people have bought it. If people learn it or not, I have no idea. But it's a sefer that everyone always heard of. That there's a massive sefer on the sugya of Egla Arufa from Chaim Kanievski. Okay. Now, the shaila is, when did Rav Chaim Kanievski write this sefer? So I mentioned already earlier that a lot of times Rav Chaim Kanievski gives us dates when he does things, and he even in his Hagdamas to his Seforim, and sometimes at the conclusion of the sefer will say something, and he also a lot of times gives us insight in why he writes a particular sefer, which is very useful because we don't have to guess. He says it straight out. Now, so in this sefer Nachal Eisan, when we look at it, so first of all, he says again, Bialdusi, he decided to be mavar the sugya of Egla Arufa as much as possible. He realized there's not so much literature on the sugya, and he decided he's going to go through this topic. And he lists out a few reasons, which we'll discuss in a moment. He says that the first edition that I wrote on this, that I did not publish, was in Tuf Shin Tests. Okay, it's pretty far back. Tuf Shin Tests brings us to his early 20s when he's writing this sefer. Okay, now that time, the Chazon Ish is alive and well, and he shows it to the Chazon Ish, and he spoke to him a lot about many of the issues in the sefer. Not only that, throughout the sefer, he brings tons of material from the Chazon Ish, but I'm not talking about material of the Chazon Ish's writings, conversations he had with the Chazon Ish about topics relating to the sefer. Then he says, I went through it again, And then he goes through the third time, it seems, and eventually he prints it in the 70s, I believe it was. His father also went through the sefer very carefully. His father wrote Ha'aris, also was published. It's printed at least 6-7 editions. I'm not sure, but in many of the editions he adds a few different Ha'aris, material people sent in about the actual sefer, and his father also seemed to have been very, very impressed with the sefer. Okay, now last time I've mentioned that he was he that some of the people that had a tremendous influence on him was the Chazon Ish and was his father. And you can see here we see not in that their materials are included in here, and conversations with them are in here. And he stresses this already in the Sefer, like right away in Agdama says, "V'gam haya lemar einay maran Chazon Ish." Now, Yaldusi, I don't know the exact age when Yaldusi means when he decided to do this, because even when you have the date Tafshin Tes that he did the Iker Ksiva, this is a crazy amount of literature that he went through in order to produce this work, as I will discuss shortly. So he obviously started this earlier. I mean, say in his teens he started. Now, it seems at some point in this sefer, there's discussion about brachas. In brachas, there's all types of conversations in brachas and rishonim. Which brachas, what brachas do you make, and when do you make brachas? Certain mitzvahs if you do, if you don't, and also a nusach bracha also comes up a lot. When do you make, let's say, you'll say, you just say the mitzvah, or other times you add in the word shell. Let's say by Chanukah, lahadlik ner shel Chanukah, or is it lahadlik ner Chanukah, and this plays out in many mitzvahs. Okay, so this is a known conversation in halacha, which a lot has been written about. Somehow in this sefer, Chaim Kanievski has a kuntris. It seems it was its own kuntris that originally was going to be put elsewhere, published elsewhere. This kuntris is it spans over, I would say, about 15 jam-packed pages of Marmakaimis on this sugya, where he breaks down approximately 10 main shitas rishonim, and then he handles in all the different mitzvahs with them. There's hundreds of Marmakaimis over here. One could get complete chalisha sadas when one reads this. This was done without a computer, way before computers that were before Bari Lam programs, like Chachma, Hebrew books, Google books. This is way before this. The fact that someone was able to open up this amount of Svarim is mind-boggling. But it's not so much that he collected information. He puts it in. This shito is this. He sets it up very, very clearly. It seems he was going to write a sefer on Shiluach HaKain, or Shluch HaKan, whatever, however you want to pronounce it. And he was going to put it there. In the end, I guess he decided to take that kuntris here. Now, what age did he write that kuntris? So it seems that he wrote this kuntris he started writing this kuntris, or he finished writing this kuntris at the age of 14, which is rather remarkable. At least according to this book I've been quoting a few times already, Hasvarim, on Rav Chaim Kanievski Svarim, and it's unbelievably remarkable. If someone wants to get a glimpse of his Bikiyas and also Iyun at the same time, because of so many things he just throws in parentheses, not with footnotes. Later on, he developed a more clear way how to do this, by creating a form of a Shari Tzion. But I guess in the Nachal Eisan he decided not to do it, so it's more confusing. But there's tons of information in these parentheses, small points going off on small little tangents. And this is written at a very young age. I'm sure that over the years he updated it until he printed in the late 70s, but still it's beyond remarkable. And one doesn't have to learn the complicated sugyas of Egla Arufa. You could just have a glimpse of more easier topics over here in this chibur. This topic has been written about, as I mentioned already, in the Times of Yerushalayim. The Avodah Raham has pages on it. In the recent edition of the Avodah Raham from Rebellia Greenswag, there's tons of material in it on this topic, and Rebuva Margolis in an interesting small sefer called Makara Bracha, he also wrote about it. Akopanim, we see Rav Chaim Kanievski in a side topic that he put into this sefer already in full glory at a young age. Now, but why does he write the sefer? Why does he pick Egla Arufa? What was it that sparked his interest in Egla Arufa? So I said we just turned to the Hagama, and Rav Chaim Kanievski spells it all out for us. The first thing that Rav Chaim Kanievski says, he says that he brings he says is that there's a sefer Hasidim that First, he brings a Gemara in Saita, which is also relevant, but first he brings a Sefer Hasidim as his reason. And this Sefer Hasidim we have spoken about actually recently, earlier this year, by learning Masechtas Moed Katan. Basically, the Sefer Hasidim talks about that there's certain Masechtas or Inyanim that become sort of like a mace mitzvah, and it's a great schus if someone goes ahead and learns them. And we discussed at great length of what different aspects of this Sefer Hasidim, but Rav Chaim Kanievski brings this Sefer Hasidim and Egla Rufa, as I'm going to list out shortly, is one of these areas that's not so much spoken about. Actually, you could say right now, or I don't have to wait. Basically, Egla Rufa. So to begin, Egla Rufa becomes in. We find it. There's a few psukim at the end of Parsha Shoftim. Basically, we find a dead body in a field. So what happens with it? And we don't know who is the person who's killed over here. And there's all different details in literally 9 psukim about I guess in English translated, the unsolved murder. And then the Zakanim have to come down and they measure from the body and they figure out all different details. Now, there's a sugya in Saita, 2 blot approximately, maybe 2.5 blot about it. There's not even Taisis over there. It's just Rashi pretty much. And from there, Rav Chaim Kanievski goes ahead and he writes a sefer Nachal Eisan. Now, how many pages is a Nachal Eisan? So you'll say, 10 pages, 20 pages. No, we're talking about without getting into the additions, over 312 pages, without all the additions. And these pages are jam packed. More recently, the later editions are smaller, but the original edition Nachal Eisan was a big, tall volume packed with material.
So how's it structured? What did he write it around? Is it on the Rambam?
So I'm gonna get to how he. So right now, let's good point. Let's discuss quickly what he did. He created a top part of halacha, which he calls the halachas of Egla Rufa. I'm going to elaborate more how he breaks it down shortly. And then on the bottom, he has a running commentary to be mefarish all the halachas that he has on top. He calls them Svasa Nachal and Nachal Noivea. These are okay. Now one could see. Is you look on top over here is the words, and then over here and all this is pages and pages of material, and I'm going to give some samples of things shortly. Now, but what's significant is he took something. There's a sugya in Shas. It's not like there was no sugya in Shas, but if one learns the sugya of Egla Rufa, we'll find so today there are some achronim on Saita. It's not a masechta learned so much in yeshiva masechtas, but Yomi learns it, and there was svarim written about it before. Very nice svarim on the masechta itself, and there are discussions in the achronim, and I'm going to show shortly what it is that Rav Chaim Kanievski was doing, and what was a little bit more to try to give a theory what was behind what he was doing about this. Anyway, but the first Nakuda that Rav Chaim Kanievski mentions, and his reason is he's pointing to this Sefer Hasidim, which we already were ma'arich about before, so I have Rachmanis and we don't have to chazer it over. Now, the second point, which is a theme that Rav Chaim Kanievski mentions time and time again in various svarim of his, is a Chafetz Chaim in a small sefer called Maimer Torah Ar, which I also spoke about in a different time about learning Kachim in general, by Yuma, by Daf Yomi was learning Yuma, that Chafetz Chaim was famous for making a mapecha to try to get the Olam. He was a Kain and various other things to get the Olam to learn Kachim. And in this Chibur, which was this small little work, it found the Kol Kisei Chafetz Chaim. He discusses the great schusim of learning Kachim. And one of the aspects that he brings up is that that there's certain mitzvahs that now we don't have a Beis Hamikdash, we're not able to be mekayim these mitzvahs. So there's a special inyan to learn these mitzvahs, because through learning these mitzvahs, it's ki'ilu you mekayim them. Chafetz Chaim brings this down from various makayros. Reb Chaim Kanievski was very into this, and this is a theme which is found in a few other svarim of his. He brings this Chafetz Chaim piece for why he's going into said noisim. Perhaps we'll get to some of them eventually, maybe even today. But in his Sefer Archus Yosher, which is mostly a Musar Sefer, which also needs its own discussion, but he has a chapter called Simcha Shel Mitzvah, and here too, in the chapter, he brings down the the material about this with the Chafetz Chaim again, showing that there's early sources, and he also adds a different prat over here, which is that there was a big Indian in general. There's certain mitzvahs that don't come too easily. So he shows a face with the Gra, his father, other people, that there were certain mitzvahs that if they come your way, one should go out of the way. One should make sure, so to speak, to try to do them. One of them was, he says, his father was he was able to be Mekayim Reishis Hagez, Pidyon Petach Hamar. There's a few videos on the internet of different Gedolim doing it. There was even a sefer on Pidyon Petach Hamar, these unique mitzvahs, and when it comes that we're able to do it, to run and do it. So he's using this after he says the Chazon Ish has such a point that one shekol mitzvah chayiv kolim al kol panim pam achas b'chayiv l'kaimoi. There's such a concept. There's many other sources for such a thing, but he also was into this nakuda. And interestingly enough, in his sefer Seforim, he has lists of, they printed some of them in Xavier of his some mitzvahs that he had, like mamish, like a small page where he had what to do for these mitzvahs. Which was very interesting, that he didn't just so he was learning everything, trying to keep in mind when it will come up. Matnas Kuna, Reish Sagez, Petach Hamar, like a small handbook for himself. I don't know if he ever planned on printing it, of Pashat, how to do it halacha l'maisa, and not which Tiklach Torah. Maybe it seems some of these mitzvahs he was going to write about them, also small chidurim, but he wasn't able to, for various reasons, I guess lack of time or whatever. But this yesod that I'm saying from the Chafetz Chaim, which he brings over here for this sefer, was also, since Egla Rufa is something that it's not common to be able to Mekayim, especially today, for sure not. So that also was another push for him to write about this mitzvah. And as I said, it seems to be a theme of his in other svarim also. Now, there's another nakuda, which is also a nakuda of his in general, and this nakuda is that kol haTorah kula has relation with each other. He likes to use a beautiful Yerushalmi, Torah aniyim b'makam echa v'ashirim b'makam acher, which is a key point that which one sees it by him, especially how all of Torah could end up relating and becoming a piece of information. One thing that seems to not have anything to do with it could play out in a completely different sugya. Here too, again, there's a famous Nefesh Chaim, Rav Chaim Volozhiner in his Ruach Chaim. There's a famous piece where he talks about hafach b'hafach of the Kulispa, and he says, specifically says, when one's learning Masechta Sukkah, Bidin Sukkah, Yechayim lahaitzi lahatir aguna uchedoima, that somehow from the learning of the Sugya, Masechta Sukkah, you could come up with a way how to be matir aguna. So now, when one learns this piece of this Chaim Volozhiner, you could think, and maybe that it means is that, you might take it to mean, that you get the understanding of learning, and your mind gets sharper and stuff like that, and that's the justification sometimes people say to learn different things, but it's not true at all. It seems and someone asked Rav Chaim Kanievski specifically, what's shot in this piece of Rav Chaim Volozhiner? He stelled to a Gemara in Baba Basra that's specifically a case. From there, it will come out that it would be mamish. Rav Chaim Kanievski's mamish meduyik, and aguna shaila could be learned from a piece of a sugya in Masechta Sukkah. Take again here we have Rav Chaim Kanievski's Bakiyus answering it up. But the point is that Rav Chaim Kanievski uses this Yerushalmi in various svarim of his, that all of Torah plays out for everything. So it's not, and I hope to elaborate about this shortly, is it's not just about, okay, there's Egla Rufa, there's a Sugya and Saita, and that's it, and that's all he's going to talk about. It's 300 pages. The Gemara, as I said already, there's not even Taisus over there. So how does a man come up with and write a chibur of 300 plus pages? So and that's what I'm going to get to shortly. Upon him, these three reasons, Rav Chaim Kanievski writes, are the reasons why he's putting out this sefer.
Okay, beautiful. So just before you continue, can you just summarize the three reasons? 1, 2, 3.
Okay, so the first reason, to summarize the reasons over here, is one reason based on the Sefer Hasidim, that there's an Indian to learn Masechtas that, or Noisim even, that are not learned. And this seems to be a theme of Rav Chaim Kanievski in other sugyas as well. The second thing is that mitzvahs, there's an Indian based on the Chafetz Chaim, Chazon Ish, and many other Makairis. There's an Indian of mitzvahs that one cannot do today, either because the Beis Hamikdash, such as Karbanis, or other mitzvahs that don't come by. How is one mekayim the mitzvah? By learning them. The third is that all of Torah relates to each other, and learning Egla Rufa could help in Edus, and in all other sugyas. So it's not just that Egla Rufa is just Egla Rufa, it can help Mamish and Kol Terakula, as Rav Chaim Kanievski definitely demonstrates quite well in this sefer.
Okay, gewaldig, beautiful.
Okay, so this is the Hagdama of what Rav Chaim Kanievski is writing, why he writes the sefer.
Okay, so now you take us into the sefer itself. We're opening the pages.
Right. So like this. As I when I began the first one of this series, I said like this, that my ha'ara is that Rav Chaim Kanievski was influenced by different people, such as the Chazon Ish, his father the Stipler, the Vilna Gaon, the Mishnah Berurah. Now, as I said already, he's quoting you a concept from the Chafetz Chaim, which he quotes in many of his Seforim, and he mentions already in this Hagdama that he spoke a lot with his father, and he says, I also spoke a lot with the Chazon Ish, and he brings you a lot of material from these people. But looking deeper into this, and also obviously there could be ties to the Gra, also with this Yerushalmi, which eventually maybe I'll elaborate on a different time, but like this. I'm looking at the Sefer, and I see a Sefer, I start learning through the Sefer. And as I said, Agla Rufa barely has any material. So someone says, how do you create material? So I started thinking about this, and all of a sudden it hit me that as I'm learning the Sefer, I see that there are influences, I would say, strong influences on the Chibur, the famous yeshiva classic work, not only in the yeshiva world, but in the world at large, the Minchas Chinuch. And so first I would like to give some background, as I've done in the past, a little bit about the Minchas Chinuch. What was the strengths of the Minchas Chinuch? It has many strengths, and obviously we cannot discuss all aspects of it today. And that was a sort of a model. The Rav Chaim Kanievski used that sefer for a model in creating this sefer Nachal Eisan, with keeping in mind his points in the introduction. So the Minchas Chinuch is born in the early 1800s. He dies in 1874, and he's a Rav in a Chashuva city. And from what we know about him, he's not really so active as a Rav. What that means is we don't have too many tshuvas of his. He doesn't answer so many shaylas, even though it was a big city. He has a few talmidim, and he's sitting and learning Yomim V'Layla. Okay, and as I said, not so much in his lifetime printed of his. He's not involved with tshuvas. He doesn't really get involved with controversies. And then what happens? In 1869, mamish a few years before he dies, a work comes out called Minchas Chinuch. And it doesn't even say his name on it, which is fascinating because it ends up being that this sefer, which creates, I guess you could say, a mapecha in the yeshiva world, and the world that, when I mean the yeshiva world over here, I'm not specifically, but it also includes the Litvish yeshiva world, but it means the world literally everywhere. This sefer took the world, whether it's Hasidim, Svardim, everyone was just blown away by this work. And he prints this sefer. It's 1869. It doesn't even have his name on it, so he's not even getting any cover for it. Okay. Who prints it? A chashuv, a Talmud of his, also a great guy, a Dayan, Rabbi Rappaport, also a fascinating person, but not the time and place to talk about him. Now, why does he print the sefer? So interestingly enough, we again, without getting into barichus, some various interesting theories, but it seems that he wasn't even so into this Hebrew himself, and it seems that his real material that he had in other noisim was stolen at the time around, and it says in Agdama he worked. So this stuff also shouldn't get. Ki b'yamim ha'elu nignav me'iti kayvetz gadol chidushim ala Torah v'ala Shulchan Aruch. It was recommended for him to print this sefer. So he goes in there and prints this sefer. I remember once seeing, it says it in somewhere in the Agdama, but I remember once seeing he looked at it as a small little contrast that he has on the Sefer Chinuch. I think I heard once that he's a brother-in-law in one of his marriages with Rav Chaim Sanzer, and I think I heard a nusach or read a nusach somewhere at one point that they asked him, after his stuff was stolen, and so they said to him, "Does anything left?" He says, "Yeah, I have a small little chibur on the chinuch called Minchas Chinuch." He says, "Print it, and you don't understand what's going to happen with it." Okay, and Taka the bracha of Reb Chaim Sanzer, which Kiyadua was very very chashuv in the world at large at the time, was Mekuyim, and that this sefer became a bestseller. But I don't know if it has anything to do with that particular thing. It just took off because it was something beyond unique, and everyone picked up on this. And what we have over here is it wasn't even a famous person. No, he was a Rav of a city, but he didn't even though he was a Rav of a Chash of a city, he didn't even write his name. Okay. Interestingly, for example, the Duke Seforim writes in his Ha'aris on Shem Agdoilim that he was talking about the Sefer Chinuch. He says, yeah, he saw a Chashav Chibur and Ksav Yad on the Chinuch from. He says it's called the Minchas Chinuch, and it's from Rabbi Yosef Babad, the Av Bezin Tarnipon. So he saw it already in manuscript. I guess at that time when he saw it or knew about it, it was he knew that who the author was, but it's not clear if everyone knew who the author was later on. Okay, now the Aderes in his incredible autobiography writes at one point, right when it came out, he got a copy of it. And later on, he decided, at one point he was sitting and he just had the Sefer Minchas Chinuch, and he wrote a lot of Chedushim on these type of inyanim. B'chlal, Aderes was also into these type of things. And he wrote a Sefer called Cheshbon Shal Mitzvah, which was a manuscript for years. Baruch Hashem, in our generation, about 10 years ago or so, the Sefer came out. Incredible work on the Chinuch also. But he says, interestingly enough, it's a shame I could have also written a Sefer with even more Bekias, but he says, Avoinaisai Garmuli, and he was not Zeicha to this. He was saying about himself, whereas Minchas Chinuch, where funny is the Minchas Chinuch didn't even look at the Sefer as being his main thing. Imagine what we really lost and what the stolen Ksavim, or whatever the reasons behind the stolen Ksavim, whatever happened. But okay, we were Zeicha to the Minchas Chinuch. I'll call upon him. Someone describes at that time when the Sefer came to Volozhin, it was Rav Moshe Shmukler describes how everyone was running to see it, everyone was talking about it. It was a Sefer to see, a Sefer to look at. Okay. In recent years, one other point that in the Yeshiva Welt they like to say was always constantly on Rav Chaim's table. And Rav Chaim was into it. He quoted it. I think he quotes it even in Rav Chaim al Rambam, and he never quotes any Achronim. I once made a joke that I want to write an article about all the different svarim that are on Rav Chaim's table, because it might have been a very big table. But that's a cynical comment about it, because this sefer was not cynical. This sefer definitely deserved to be on the table.
Just to clarify, Rav Chaim, now you mean Rav Chaim Brisker?
Correct, Rav Chaim Brisker. Because Rav Chaim Kanievski's table, it will be forever, as we'll see. I already mentioned a little bit, but I mean Rav Chaim Brisker. Yeah, Rav Chaim Soloveitchik. Yes, correct. Sorry for not being clear. Anyway, so the Minchas Chinuch is this sefer that causes a mapecha in the world at large. Everyone's talking about it. It's updated shortly afterwards with different ha'aras, isafas. Okay. Anyway, so this sefer, Minchas Chinuch, had his one cute thing about the sefer is that it had a lot of Rashi Tevis. This Rashi Tevis made it for some people very hard to decipher the words. What are you saying? The way they say it is because there was a limited funding in those days. It's not only this sefer, but in other svarim also, Rashi Tevis was to save money. But I've heard of numerous times from different old-time Rabbeim or Rabbanim from way back. I said a part of the galus was not if you could understand Minchas Chinuch. That was maybe even easier. It was if you could understand the Rashi Tevis of the Minchas Chinuch. Now, comes along in our generation, Machon Yerushalayim, and one of the most incredible works that they ever did, that they got their crazy fame from it, I would even say, is they decided to open up all the Rashi Tevis, make a beautiful edition, a completely user-friendly edition of Minchas Chinuch, and since then it's sold thousands and thousands of copies all over the world. When I was a bacher, this was the a famous bar mitzvah present. I have no idea if people give it today even, but everyone has it, everyone learns it, and for sure by the fact that even though the Minchas Chinuch was printed numerous times until Machon Yerushalayim came around, and we have hundreds of different gedolim that wrote ha'aras about, and they were collected in different svarim, and there was even whole chiburim written on Minchas Chinuch, but the point is that Machon Yerushalayim did something incredible with what they did.
I may sound ignorant with this question. Was the Minchas Chinuch dafka had to have been written on the Chinuch itself? Because it seems like most of it is not even Chinuch related.
Oh, so it's actually not Amratz's question. It's an excellent question. I'm going to touch on it for a second in any minute, but it's not Amratz's question at all. Now, Rav Chaim Kanievski even also was very into the Minchas Chinuch. There's an edition of it that was printed with his ha'aras. It seems he was planning on writing a whole sefer on it, even, but it never happened for whatever reasons. Bekitzer, so there's many editions of the sefer, as I said, and I even though I would normally not do such a thing, but just this happened literally less than 24 hours ago. A good friend of mine who's actually a descendant of the Minchas Chinuch. Him and his father, for more than 10 years, were learning the sefer Minchas Chinuch, the Iyun, and they had an idea, which was, up till now, it was available for the people that read Hebrew well. So to bring it to the English audience, and they did a few years ago they put out a small work on Mila. This is the Hudners. I don't have copies. It's only available in America, so I can't show copies. But literally less than 24 hours, copies arrived in America. This is Rabbi Moshe Hubner and his father. They worked on this work, and it's in English for Pesach specifically. They did some of the mitzvahs of Pesach. It's a few hundred pages from some sample pages that I've seen. It looks beautiful. And what the significance is, it's now available for English audience. They didn't just translate Chas v'Shalom. They didn't just translate them. It gets lost in translation. They give you the whole background, as I'm about to say. Well, and one will be able to understand a little bit what they're trying to do. The point is, the sefer is something unique. So now that I said it's unique, I'm darshaning about what's unique. But what's unique about it, and what does that have to do with Rav Chaim Kanievski? Correct. This is a very valid question. So one last source about this, and is as follows: Rav Soloveitchik, Rav Yasher Bar Soloveitchik from Yeshiva University, in a famous essay / book, eventually called Halachic Man in Ha'ara, he talks about various achronim that were Isaac in Kachim. So he talks about the success of the halachic work Minchas Chinuch, published in 1869 and reprinted many times. He says is, in large measure, owing to the fact that the author did not limit himself to discussing family and civil law, the Hainu Nashim and Azikin issues, but concerned himself with all the commandments of the Torah. On the contrary, the author only touched briefly on matters of civil law, but he discussed at length those laws that were operative only when the temple was still standing. I mean to say, what helped him in Minchas Chinuch was that he wasn't only working with Nashim and Azikin. He wrote a chibur, which is Negei Kol Tariku. So he asked, it's called Minchas Chinuch. What does that have to do with anything? So the answer is that there's an earlier work, a Rishon, called the Chinuch. The Chinuch, which deserves its own series of conversations about, but the Chinuch was an incredible work. We don't know, as much as a lot of ink has been spilled to figure out who the author is. There's no agreement at the end of the day who wrote the work, but it's an incredible, incredible work. Came along the Yosef Babad, and he attaches to this chibur his sefer Minchas Chinuch. Now, what the Chinuch did is he writes the mitzvah. He collects the 613 mitzvahs, going with the Rambam, sometimes not, bringing you many different things about the mitzvah. He breaks it down into sharashim, tamim. Sometimes you can have a page about a mitzvah, sometimes you can have a few pages of the mitzvah, and a lot of times he'll throw you in the Gemaras, and sometimes they'll have a chiddush, but not as well known. There's a lot of chiddushim and halacha in here, and it's an incredible, incredible work, the Chinuch. And so the Minchas Chinuch, he attached to this a sefer where he had a sefer that's on the Taryag mitzvahs, and he wrote a chibur on it. Now, how much is he mefarish, and is that his concern? It seems, again, this requires a lot of iyun. It seems that it's not so much dependent, and he's not calling it even that he's writing a pirish on the Chinuch, but he wanted to attach it to the Chinuch, and it could be there'll be a drop of explanation why it works out shortly. But bottom line is that he took the Sefer Chinuch, which is on the mitzvahs, and he wrote this massive work. Today in the Mechon Yerushalayim edition, because now, as I said, they opened up the Rosh Tevis and they broke paragraphs and they made it much more user-friendly than original. It's 3 massive volumes. They're actually working on a set that has 7-8 volumes already, something like that, which is Ha'aris and Ha'aris of all the different raid and Ha'aris of Gedolim on the Minchas. Now, to get to the point over here, on a tangent, what does it have to do with Rav Chaim Kanievski? So the answer is like this. When you learn Egla Rufa, as I said, there's virtually almost nothing. There's 2 blot without a Tosfos. Interesting, who is one of the first people that sort of makes an asik from Egla Rufa is the Minchas Chinuch. He takes this mitzvah and he turns it, and he has 25 different issues in his Minchas Chinuch type style, as Rav Soloveitchik said, and he does this to many other mitzvahs, but not only, he doesn't limit himself just to Egla Rufa, and he has 25 beautiful pieces. I only know 25 because I could just easily open up my Mechon Yerushalayim Minchas Chinuch and I see this. And basically, he's Meirich on these pratim. Even Mashal, Rabbi Yerucham Fishel Perlau, who's also legendary, being Isaac and mitzvahs and having arichas nifla on different sugyas, Egla Rufa by him is very small. So you have both the Minchas Chinuch, Rabbi Yerucham Fishel Perlau also quoted a lot by Rav Chaim Kanievski. And more interesting, these are the two, I would say, the two people that have some material on Egla Rufa besides the Achrayim. Comes along Rav Chaim Kanievski, and he goes and he literally learns everything. He tracks down everything, and he takes every single prat of the sugya of Egla Rufa that possibly could, and he breaks it down more and more and more. And this is something the Minchas Chinuch was one of the first that does such a thing. I said he did 25 issues. So Chaim Kanievski takes that and does this into hundreds and hundreds. So the difference is Minchas Chinuch did this for all Taryag mitzvahs. So Chaim Kanievski only did it on one mitzvah. As a matter of fact, I've been trying to think of another example of someone who took such an obscure mitzvah and turned it into this. I mean, say there are, especially today, legendary on every topic under the sun. There's not one sefer. There's already whole shelves of things, but a lot of times at least it has a sugya to start with. So here, I agree. Egla Rufa is a Gemara. It's psukim, but still, when you tell someone you pull off a sefer on Egla Rufa, it sounds like, how does one even do that? And yes, what would be one of the first addresses? You open up your Minchas Chinuch, and Minchas Chinuch has 25 pieces. So here, Rav Chaim Kanievski goes, I'll put the similar ideas with the Minchas Chinuch, which, going back to the Chinuch, what the Chinuch always ends off is, who's a Nageya? Where is a Nageya? He likes to throw in if it's a mitzvah b'zman hazeh, if it's Nageya for women or not. So the Minchas Chinuch, legendary, what makes the Minchas Chinuch so unique? What turned it into being this incredible sefer? So again, I am not attempting to touch on this, and I'm sure so many different people have different valid points about it. Interestingly enough, recently a full doctorate turned into a book was written on the Minchas Chinuch by a from lady in Eretz Yisrael. Very, very useful material. And here, just to show a picture, sometimes people don't like to see a picture, how the book looks here. And this book deals with a lot of the aspects of the lamdas of the Minchas Chinuch and breaking it down. She talks about what the Chinuch also.
We also have to mention Rav Schlesinger's sefer on the Minchas Chinuch.
Correct. Reb Schlesinger, I'm always upset. I wish that they could finish it. It's just one incredible work on the few mitzvahs that he did. I still remember my great simcha when I found it in some store. I thought you couldn't even get it. I found it a bunch of years ago, and I always feel bad that it's not finished. And there's so much on Minchas Chinuch. That's not that. As I said, we could speak about it for hours, and I'm sure people have a lot to say about it. But one nakuda is, and this is that the Minchas Chinuch also he breaks down a mitzvah and takes a sugya and he's breaking it down into so many different aspects and asking so many different questions to that sometimes questions that you might have, and he will be one of the only addresses that talk about it, because he took it as a mitzvah and then to mamish, like legendary in Lamates Malachas, he has a huge kuntris, which was also a small little thing in his eyes, but in the yeshiva world, when you learn Lamates Malachas, it's the starting point of many different chakiras, different shailas. His way of breaking down these chakiras, and he wasn't this is pre-date. He's nothing to do with Rav Chaim. The lamdas in there, people love it. It's so enjoyable. It's written very geschmack, and he brings rayas and kalachayat. He'll bring a raya from a Gemara, different places. And then what's also famous, and I think this, in order to illustrate a lot of times his chakiras and his different questions, he used a whole new literature. He used the androgynous and the Chatzi Avichatzi Ben Chayrin to an extreme and all these different things, and it became even famous. The Minchas Chinuch created, I forget which great gadol called it, a whole new family of people that we talk about. And it wasn't because he just was trying to fill a paper. It was because the best way to illustrate a lamdas is when you give nafkaminas and you show a Gemara, but then you show what will be how to illustrate a certain nafkamina, because sometimes it could be very fine, the differences, you don't understand it. So if you use examples, then it could bring out a lot of times the great machlekes that's really happening in front of your face, and you don't see it between various rishonim or more. So the Minchas Chinuch did this on a very large scale. Comes on Rav Chaim Kanievski, and he basically took the idea of the Minchas Chinuch for Taryag mitzvahs, and he said, I'm going to do it for one mitzvah, Egla Rufa. And he handles with dozens of pieces start with Minchas Chinuchs, and he just runs with it. And when you start looking at it, your mind could spin. I'm just going to give one example, because when I looked at this, I first couldn't understand what was going on. I'm like, what's happening over here? So at one point, he has a kuntris, and this kuntris, he's talking about if who could be an aid. Somehow it relates in the sugya of being of an aid. If an aid echad comes and says he saw the person getting killed, whatever, it's okay. So he begins. He says, "Aid echad kasher amar reisi as a hayrig uva kasher achav amar imach hayisi v'lay reisi arfin." And he has a few lines where he talks about various aspects of Edis, which is complicated areas in Shas, and then he says like this. So he goes and he has the next 20 one second, something like 30 pages, where he has this broken down to in 81 scenarios of different ways of Edis that could be accepted. Kasher nega kasher nega psul, kasher nega beis ksherim. And he, when you look at this, and he has for each one, sometimes a paragraph, sometimes a page with the relevant sugyas. You're looking at this, how he basically put in areas of Edus, stuffing it into here, but thinking about it like breaking down like Minchas Chinuch type thing, but to an extent like no one ever imagined to be able to do. Okay, anyway, but when you go back to the when you open up the shar of the sefer after the Hagdama, the Mafteches, so he breaks it down into 17 parts. And when is the dinoyig, the dinim tzechalal, aliza chalal, who dinoy de mihakeu, how do you measure it, leiza ear, and every single one. You look at the simonim in the Teichen Yanim, is a very mephoretic Teichen Yanim. You're like, holy cow! How does someone take a topic and just break it down into more parts and more parts? It's incredible.
I'm sure if it's not done yet on some sefer, maybe someone's going to go through these seforim and just like make some kind of mafteach like they have on Gus Moshe and like on Mishnah Brura, all the different types of subjects that are discussed. In Nachal Eisan, you have them talking about Eidos, and you have them talking about brachas, like you mentioned before.
Right. So first of all, Rav Chaim Kanievski realized that it needs a maftech, and someone went ahead in his lifetime. Rav Chaim Kanievski was very appreciative, and he made some type of maftech. However, I believe that, especially today with Rav Chaim Kanievski, from then until today, probably someone's going to come up and make a more fancier Nachal Eisan and make it more user. It needs to be even more user. It's not user friendly enough. You really have to learn the sugya. The Rashi Tevis are also issues sometimes, but he literally. I mean, he creates whole topics, new areas, and you see this from what I'm saying with the Hagdama. He literally, one of the Nakudas I brought down in Hagdama, where he literally takes Kala Tarakula Tayani Makamecha Rashim Makamacher, he plugs it back in. He out Minchas Chinuch, the Minchas Chinuch, so to speak. And that to me is what's mind-boggling when you're learning it. I did not learn the whole sefer. I went through various parts, and you're just looking at it, and you're like, how does he get to here? It's unbelievable. Now, just to be Messiah, a few last parts over here, if the time is late. Basically, as I said, he just brings down everyone. So one person that I found interesting, and a lot of times when you go through a sefer, you could see different things that people claim are not so. It's not so pashut, or they're not so true. Now, his general mahalach in learning that comes out from this sefer, I hope to deal with more when I deal with the Mirz Hashem, the Chibur Derech Hamuna. So I'm not trying to talk about everything right now. Kol Torah Kula Regel Achas. Although Rav Chaim Kanievski does Kol Torah Kula into Egla Rufa, I'm not trying to do Kol Torah Kula into his Nachal Eisan. But literally, let's say looking around at one point. So there's a Dvar of Ram that has a few simonim on the sugyas of Egla Rufa. Rav Chaim Kanievski brings down every single piece from it in the relevant places, and he handles them. Lamashal. Interestingly enough, the Aruch HaShulchan. So everyone, the Aruch HaShulchan is famous for writing also a work called Aruch HaShulchan HaAsid, which he concerned himself with areas of halacha that today some of it actually is relevant because Zram, but when he was writing, Zram wasn't so relevant. But there's Zram, there's Kachim, Meshundika work of the Aruch HaShulchan. But what about Egla Rufa? So you live and learn. In Shulchan Aruch, Egla Rufa doesn't come up because it's not really Negea. But the Aruch HaShulchan put into his Choshen Mishpat Egla Rufa. He has many simonim. Mamash at the end of Choshen Mishpat. Rav Chaim Kanievski talks about all the time, dozens of times. He's bringing down the Aruch HaShulchan not in Aruch HaShulchan Asid, in Aruch HaShulchan. Now, so first of all, what's the chashivas of this? I always heard that in Bnei Brak, especially because of the Chazon Ish, they said that they're very mezalzel, they're very not into Aruch HaShulchan. Here I see a work literally quoting Aruch HaShulchan to Seder. Now, he grad also tells to Aruch HaShulchan's in Yeridea, Aruch HaShulchan's even Aruch Chaim, but that's beyond the point. Point is that Aruch HaShulchan was important enough for him, and as I said, Aruch HaShulchan was also one of these people, besides the Minchas Chinuch, and besides, let's say, the Dvar of Ram and Yehuda Fisher Perla, that they wrote things about Egla Rufa, but when you look at the sefer, mind-boggling. Okay. Anyway, I already mentioned it. I got questions about it. So his relationship with Reuven Margolis, here he quotes a Nefesh Chaya of Ruven Margol is not such a commonly found thing, but even looking in the various, there's millions of pictures of Rav Chaim Kanievski being sent and posted in different places. You could see in some of the pictures in his library his well-used copies of Ruven Margol's Chiburim on the Zayar, Sefer Bayer, Mamish. You could see them clearly in these pictures. Anyway, point is, he takes every sefer and he went through, and I have no idea how many svarim he opened up, but it's clear he opened up hundreds and hundreds of svarim, Rishainim, Achrainim, Tshuva svarim, and somehow he put them in the right. It's organized, it's in the right place, and part of it's not just like he collected material and wrote like an encyclopedia. Here's this and this. He deals with everything. He processes information. He's making tons of cheshbainis. Now, we last time already, and the previous time before that also, we said that he has this incredible yada. He's using that here also somehow. And he's using, I said, Targumim and Psukim and Tanakh that you think have no relevance. Somehow in a Targum over here could come up and to be relevant. Yerushalmi over here, a Tosefta over there. Everything becomes relevant. Also, again, back to that Hagdama where he says, Svarim and Chumash, he opened up everything, whatever he was able to get access, which is very interesting. I don't know where he had access to all these Svarim. I was always a very big fan of the Pardes Yosef, unbelievable Hasidic sefer, but it's an encyclopedia al Torah. He quotes it a bunch of times. He sat and opened up everything, and when one sees this sefer, you're exposed, and it's available on Hebrew books. And I feel it's very kedai, even if someone can't learn the Sugis of Egla Rufa with Zaita and everything. What they should do is they should even learn the small chibur of his on brachas. Spend a half hour, an hour, just to see. People always like, how do you put in words of Chaim Kanievski? Just open up the sefer. You open up, and I'll make it even easier. Let me tell you what page numbers, so you have less. One will have less of an excuse. Hold on. It starts, if you open it up on page Ayin Vav and onwards, about 20 pages, you open up the Sefer, read it, just even read a few pages, and you could start seeing how he's organizing masses of amount of information and handling with them, discussing with them. This Sefer is packed with lumdas, packed with conversations that, as I said, with the Chazon Ish and the Stipler. Akopanim, here we see...
No, you're saying about brachas. So right before Pesach now, we're about to embark on Yontif with so many different brachas. The Leil HaSeder, how many brachas they have. Right. I'm assuming I would take a look. I'm sure a lot of these brachas I've discussed.
Yeah, definitely. And it comes up every day. Brachas is a very negative thing, but it's just interesting to see. Because one could see it. A lot of times, you hear a hesped and they say about a person, oh, he's a guy and he knows something. Okay, shkayach. Let me read something to see it. And when you see it, you're understanding this is written before the computers, that he had to pull off the shelf hundreds of svarim, processed information. It's Mashunadik. And as I said, why he chose this and what influenced him, I believe it had something to do with the Minchas Chinuch, besides all the other influences on him.
Okay, that's a wrap.
That's all for today. A wrap
for today. Okay, thank you very much. Although we mentioned we want to do other svarim, we're going to have to get back to those. Thank you very much, Rabbi Dr. And we look forward to some more. So this, I think, is excellent before Pesach, like you mentioned. There's so much to take out and process. And what a beautiful digression into the Minchas Chinuch. So thank you very much.